Okay, welcome back. This is John Sands. Again, we're completing Chapter 3. We just completed installing the SDM. Now we want to take a look how we use the SDM to configure the router. All right, when we first install the SDM, one of the first things I would recommend that you do as an instructor is you go up to the Edit option and go to Preferences, and the first box in this area says Preview Commands Before Delivering to Router. In the classroom environment, I think it's a good idea to check that, and what that's going to do is every time you make a change in the graphical environment, it will actually bring up a box that shows what command will be delivered to the router. So this is a really good way for your students to start to learn the commands, even if they're using the graphical interface to configure the device. So we hit OK. Basically, there's three tabs that we would use. There's actually a refresh, save, search, and help tab, but the main three tabs used to configure the router are going to be home. Home basically is where we can see all the general information about our router configuration. So we can see what kind of router it is, what type of memory and flash it has. We can see what type of, what version of the iOS is running, what version of SDM is running. It will also give us information on our interfaces, if we're running VPNs through it, if we're running routing protocols, any type of intrusion detection. So it gives us just a general overview of what's happening in this router at this time. Right? In this case, we want to configure the router using the SDM, so we'd click on Configure. And along the left-hand side, you will see we have an option of configuring several groups of information. So like the first one would allow you to go in and actually configure all the different interfaces. All right, the next section, or the next tab, lets us go in and set firewall features and create access control lists and apply our access control list. We come down, and there's a tab for setting up VPNs, which will be discussed later. If we were doing security auditing, there's a section on setting up auditing. Again, a whole section on routing. If we want to set up NAT, intrusion detection, quality service, NAC features, and then finally we're going to go to additional task, which they basically throw all the other tasks into. Okay? And you can see it's a collapsible menu that comes up under additional task. All right, so as an example, one of the things that we've been talking about is router access and user accounts. So under router access, we can click on user accounts, and they've made it very simple for us. So instead of having to put in commands at the router itself, we can just do it here, and we basically can go in and edit, add, or delete a user account. So we say add, we can go ahead and create one. So I'll create user 01. We have to put a password in, user 01. Pass, user 01, pass again. You can set the privilege level that that person will be placed to when they log in, and then you can go ahead and save it. And you'll see that it comes up with this box and says, okay, it's going to send this particular command to the router. Do you want to send it? This is a good time for your students to see the commands that are actually going to be sent to the router. So in this case, we can say, yes, go ahead and deliver it. And it actually sends it out to the router at that point. A little bit of a delay while it's sending it and communicating with the router. And then it tells us it's been delivered. But that's basically all there is as far as setting up additional users. For the second section, we'd want to go down to the AAA area. Under the AAA area, it's broken down into three groups. AAA servers and groups. We're going to come back and look at this in a little bit when we set up a AAA or Radius server to authenticate our users. But that tab is basically going to be used when we have an external database that all of our routers and devices will use to authenticate our users from one central database. The second option is authentication policies, and here is where we actually implement our authentication policies. And the main one that we talk about in this course are our login policies. So we basically just click on Authentication Policies Login, and again, to add one, we'd click on Add. We give it a name. So remember, we had one called Telnet. Or Telnet Lines. Okay, and then we can come in and actually add the methods that we want to use. So let's say for Telnet that we want to use local. Well, we would go ahead and select local and hit OK. Now we can also add a second one. So if we wanted to add none, or we want to use radius as a secondary, we could do that as well. Okay, and again, it builds the command for us. When we're ready, we can basically just say deliver, and it will send it to the router itself. Okay, but that's basically how you create the AAA login policies and deliver them to the router. That's a basic overview of how we use SDM to implement local authentication, and that concludes this section.